Yeah.
I love many things I'm not supposed to love. Spiders, bats, Friday the 13th, and cats, especially black cats. I was raised with cats, lost and forsaken strays that were left to die or who survived to become tough motherfuckers. An abandoned black kitten was my first tough motherfucker, and I still think about him despite his sudden disappearance 40 years ago. Hi, this is Teresa Wilson Gunn, and you're here on Magnificent Shit, where we find lit that kicks you in the heart balls. And I'd like to give a shout out to everyone who is joining me today. First of all, it's Katie. Tell me where you're coming from.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm from Poland, but I'm currently in England by the sea.
And next up is Flaminia.
Hi everybody, I'm dialing in from San Sepolcro, which is in Tuscany, Italy.
And Alina, tell me where you're coming from.
Hi Teresa, I'm a Russian Canadian living in Chicago.
And Sophie, where are you?
Hello. Hi, I'm calling in from Brussels, Belgium, and as always, it's a great honor to be here.
And last but not least is Thaddeus Gunn. Tell me where you're coming from, hon.
From Seattle, Washington, just upstairs from you.
That's right. I'm in the basement today. So here's my story about my first motherfucker and my first kitten. I found a small furry shadow of a kitten crawling along the edge of my front lawn during the spring season of my senior year at high school. As I moved closer, the kitten froze and hissed at me like a tough motherfucker. Mama cat was long gone, so I adopted the singleton and hid him in a clothes hamper in my bedroom. Yet his mews were so loud that he was discovered by my father, who was hard of hearing. When I confessed that I was keeping a black kitten in the house, his reply was, "Oh, Blake?" And that's how I got his name. Blake soon grew big enough to climb on a lawn chair that my dad set up in the living room during that unusually hot summer. Dad left the sales tag on a string that twitched enticingly in front of the swamp cooler, and Blake just couldn't resist. Leaping and twisting in midair, he fell backwards onto the bent metal legs that supported the chair, chipping a vertebrae and losing all control of his hind legs. His wailing was the worst sound I will never forget. I took him to the local vet, who gave me two choices: to surgically insert a metal rod through his crushed spine or to euthanize him, which he thought was the most merciful thing to do. Fortunately, I found another vet 30 miles away who specialized in physical therapy for cats. So 10 days and $500 later, Blake was able to walk again, but his hind legs swayed one way while his tail whipped the other. It was hilarious to watch. It was so funny to watch his drunken stagger, but he hated being laughed at. Before Blake broke his back, I planned a long road trip along the California coast. So instead of canceling or leaving my cat behind, I took him with me, along with his bed, his litter pan, and his pain meds. He was my first non-human traveling companion who never fussed when I smuggled him into hotel rooms. And he loved sleeping on my lap while I drove for hours on the interstate highway. Blake matured into a graceful house panther with glossy fur and emerald green eyes. His purr was as deep as his meow. That fall, I moved away to attend community college, so I left him at my parents' house, promising to visit often. Every weekend, he would be waiting for me in the same spot on the front lawn where I found him. One day, I came home and he wasn't there. He just disappeared, and I never saw him again. After searching in vain, I prayed that he was a survivor and lived his life to the fullest without me. Or if something bad did happen to him, I hope that someone who loved black cats took care of my one tough motherfucker, my beautiful black cat, Blake. I still get upset about talking about him. But anyways, so in relation to that, today I'm reading a poem by Charles Bukowski titled The History of One Tough Motherfucker. At first, I didn't believe that hard-drinking, hard-living, toxic masculinity Charles Bukowski was a poet until I read On Cats, his anthology of poems in short prose. the body of work honors the animals that touched his soul, which were mostly cats. Near the end of the book, I cried over one story about a stray kitten that loses the fight against humanity's heartlessness. I wanted to find out more about Charles Bukowski's love of cats, and this particular poem kicked me right in the heart balls. The poem is The History of One Tough Motherfucker by Charles Bukowski. He came to the door one night, wet, thin, beaten, and terrorized, a white, cross-eyed, tailless cat. I took him in and fed him, and he stayed, grew to trust me until a friend drove up the driveway and ran him over. I took what was left to the vet, who said, "Not much chance. Give him these pills. His backbone is crushed, but it was crushed before and somehow mended. If he lives, he'll never walk again. Look at these x-rays. He's been shot. Look here, the pellets are still there. Also, he once had a tail. Somebody cut it off." I took the cat back. It was a hot summer, one of the hottest in decades. I put him on the bathroom floor, gave him water and pills. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't touch the water. I dipped my finger into it and wet his mouth, and I talked to him. I didn't go anywhere. I put a lot of bathroom time, and I talked to him and gently touched him. And he looked back at me with those pale blue cross eyes. And as the days went by, he made his first move. Dragging himself forward by his front legs, the rear ones wouldn't work. He made it to the litter box, crawled over and in. It was like the trumpet of possible victory blowing in that bathroom and into the city. I related to that cat. I'd had it bad. Not that bad, but bad enough. One morning he got up, stood up, fell back down, and just looked at me. "You can make it," I said to him. He kept trying, getting up, falling down. Finally, he walked a few steps. He was like a drunk. The rear legs just didn't want to do it, and he fell again, rested, then got up. You know the rest. He's now better than ever, cross-eyed, almost toothless, but the grace is back. That look in his eyes never left. And now sometimes I get interviewed. They want to hear about life and literature, and I get drunk and I hold up my cross-eyed, shot, run-over, detailed cat, and I say, look at this. But they don't understand. They say something like, "So you say you've been influenced by Celine?" No, I hold the cat up by what happens, by things like this, by this, by this. I shake the cat, hold him up in the smoky and drunken light. He's relaxed. He knows. And then it's then that the interviews end. Although I am proud sometimes when I see the pictures later. And there I am, and there's the cat, and we are all photographed together. He too knows it's bullshit, but that somehow it all helps. So I know for a fact that we've all been touched by cats. So Katie, would you like to tell us about how you felt about the poem and how you were touched by a cat?
I kind of feel like this is a great way to start the conversation about our tribe cat, that like, I think, you know, we can all build on together because we all have this sort of like connection to the little cat and how she stole our lives and our hearts and our food and like all these things. So like, I think it's just hard not to think about her when I hear the poem, although there are other cats in my life that happened by accident and that you didn't predict. And I wonder what it is about the cats that they just sort of, you know, you just see them and you just adopt them and they just sort of, it's really interesting. Like my first cat that I had, I was 13 and I just took this kitten home and decided that somehow, you know, my parents won't find out. I don't know what I was thinking, but few hours after I got the kitten, I realized that fleas were everywhere and the cat was just covered in fleas. It was a little black cat as well, and it was just like fleas everywhere. And at some point, because you keep seeing these fleas, you think you have them. So eventually I just had to call my dad in desperation. I just called him and I said, "Dad, we have to go to the vet because cat has fleas." And he said, "What cat?" And then he came. We went to the vet, just scratching each other like in a waiting room for ages. And I thought that my dad would make me, you know, get rid of the cat. But of course, just 5 minutes with the cat means you're going to have it forever. And his name was Severus because I was obsessed with Harry Potter. And Yeah, it was a wonderful cat. And also, he just left one day and never came back when he was 7 or 8. After his best friend, the dog of my family, died, he sort of few years later just decided to go, and it was strange. We're kind of still waiting for him to come back, even though it's been like 17 years. But because there's no ending to this story, you always just wait for him to come back. But I also thought about how he's a survival, like you were talking about your cat. But yeah, I was thinking that maybe this is a great opportunity for us to talk about, Snuggles, Catmos of Patmos, and how this happened. And yeah, I guess I can even bring her and say, look at this, look, this, so I would...
Yeah, Sophie has a great story about Catmos.
Well, I mean, it would
Yeah,
seem
go ahead.
that, okay, for those of you who are watching the video, not just listening to the audio, right now there's a very cute cat. Say something, Katie.
like the cutest cat in the world. Yes, being held like little Simba.
She's definitely looking at us like she knows it's all bullshit, but somehow it all counts.
She taught us a lot about self-esteem as well, and how to respect ourselves with her little paw. But this is probably a story for another time. But like, I think Sophie was actually the first person who met her, or like we met her basically at the same time on the same night. It was Jeff, you, and I, where she followed us to the hotel room, and I remember seeing you and Jeff.
After Belgium got miserably kicked out of the World Cup in football, it was just tragic.
And whiskey was not enough consolation.
This was opening night at a writer's retreat that we were at, and I was missing opening dinner with fucking Mary Carr and George Saunders because I was like, Belgium's playing, I got to see the game. So I went to see the game, and then we miserably lost to France, of all countries. And then, I came back to the hotel, and I was kind of miserable, and Jeff was like, do you want some whiskey? I was like, I think the answer to that is yes. And then this cat appeared, and then this Katie appeared, and that was the beginning of a long cat story where eventually we decided that Katie had a special bond with Snuggles. That was kind of obvious to everybody. And we ended up coming up with a very complex scheme to get the cat from the Greek island to Athens, then to Brussels via me. And then eventually that's where she came to pick it up, not with me because I had to leave, but with a friend of mine who was meanwhile taking care of the cat, and took Snuggles to the UK, where she currently is with Katie. But now it feels like the cat has so many mamas.
Yeah, like it was absolutely so incredible, but it was also such a magical thing because cats and writers, right? There's just something about it. It's almost like not cats, not dogs and writers. It has to be cats and writers. There's just like all these cool pictures of writers and cats. And even, I don't know if you got this email that I sent you, but I think this is the cat that Charles Bukowski writes about in the poem because he's white and he's like, doesn't have a tail. And it's really interesting how it changes him, like the voice changes. When
Right,
he
there's
sees the cat.
something about writers and cats. I'd never thought of that before, but you never really see writers and dogs, or very rare. There is a thing about writers and cats. By the way, I spent last night scouring the interwebs for pictures of Bukowski with that white cat, and they're all so cute, and the cat looks so well and healthy. It's really lovely.
So, Alina, did you say that you had a poem that you wanted to share with us in regards
not
to?
a poem, just I guess a quote from Bukowski. I really went down the rabbit hole of Bukowski at cat Googling after I read this poem. I think you could actually make a whole religion around this poem. I think you could make a whole religion around cats. I don't exactly propose doing that. I'm not that much of a crazy cat lady, but I used to have a cat. His name was Frankie. He was my first cat. Growing up, I always thought cats were wonderful, but I wasn't allowed to have them. And then when I was in my early 20s, a boy trying to convince me to move in with him got me a cat. He said, look, I know you can't have a cat at home with your mother where you're not allowed to have a cat. So, I'll just get whatever cat you most love at the shelter. And then, if you want to live with the cat, you have to live with me. So within a week, of course, of us getting Frankie, I was living with the guy. Frankie was a fluff ball, and he was so funny and just like so complete. He had style. You know, Bukowski actually says cats have style, and I completely agree. He would just like lie on the stairs, and he didn't care. He didn't could have a care in the world that somebody might step on him. You know, he would take up all the space in the armchair, and even people who were not cat people would like sit around him on the couch. He was so chill and zen. And then one week he got sick and he started acting really strange, and I couldn't figure out what was going on because, you know, cats are very good at hiding pain. I think that's one of the things between, maybe one of the links between cats and writers, right? You like don't, like you know, the cats are very good at hiding pain. They're very good at acting like they've got these great survival instincts to act like everything's okay. So it took me a while to realize that he really wasn't peeing. I took him to the vet, and they were like, okay, actually he's on death's door. Like it's a good thing you brought him in now because his urinary tract has been blocked actually for days, and he's basically about to die. So thank God you brought him in here. So I had to leave him. And I remember his little face looking at me like, why are you leaving me here? You know? Anyway, he had to have a surgery. They couldn't put the urethra through his little cat penis. So they had to amputate his cat penis, guys, and make him a girl hole. But he did not have there wasn't a sense that he was missing his penis or anything like that. He just didn't skip a beat, readjusted to life, was as happy as can be afterwards. Me, on the other hand, it was one of the most traumatic times of my life. So first of all, it was a very expensive surgery. I wasn't making a lot of money back then. Basically, all of my disposable income for the next like year went to paying off this like credit line from getting the cat surgery. And at one point, my boyfriend who had gotten me the cat was like, at some point you're gonna have to pull the plug on the cat. And I was like, excuse you, like, we're pulling the plug on anybody here. It is not the cat, okay? The cat survived. I just remember going into the vet every day, and they would wash him, you know, before I visited, and he would be all pink, like his little fur, his white fur was covered in blood that they had like sort of washed off partially prior to my visit so that I wouldn't be too traumatized. And he would just look at me like he was barely surviving, you know. So but he recovered. He lost so much blood. They weren't sure he would survive, but he survived anyway. He survived without the penis. He survived without the blood. He recovered. And then, you know, a lot of other things happened. I had to eventually find him another home, and I visited him for the very last time when he was about to die, and he actually was still happy and well, even with a giant cancerous lump in his little body. So that was Frankie, his little survivor. And I just want to say this one quote from Bukowski. If you're feeling bad, you just look at the cats. You'll feel better because they know everything is just as it is. Charles Bukowski.
That's awesome. Hey, Flaminia, we just spent last summer at your place, and we were introduced to your two wonderful cats, Grandpa, P-A-W, and Gizmo. So tell us how Grandpa and Gizmo are doing now.
They're doing great. Grandpa is the last cat that we adopted. We have, between me and my parents who live next to my house, we have 6 cats. And this cat came through a client of my dad who's a vet, and they had found him on the street, and they couldn't keep it. So we just had it for a while, and we tried to put him up for adoption, but nobody would adopt him. And then we just ended up adopting him. And then my mom, one day, she decided that was our grandfather reincarnated. Also because my grandpa would come to our house and look at the cats and play with them, and he would always say that he wanted to be reborn into a cat. That was his the creature that he would love to become in the next life. And so we have Grandpa now, and Grandpa is like one of the funniest things that whenever people are coming over and they don't know that one of our cats is called Grandpa, there's going to be a point in the conversation where I'm going to be like, oh, Grandpa's been out all night and I was so worried he wouldn't come back. Or is Grandpa humping that blanket again? We should
Yeah.
get him neutered now. About time. And
you
you
gotta
all
go
saw
with
that, right? Do you remember?
Oh yes.
Yeah, Sophie and I will
Oh,
remember
yeah.
very well.
Yeah. It's hard to forget the blanket sex, that's for sure.
I've been trying to.
You know, he loved your blanket, Sophie.
Sorry, you said what?
That you loved your blanket. He would
Oh,
not
yeah.
hump any other blanket.
So much. He was so much in love with the blanket that was in me and Kate, like the room that me and Katie were sleeping in. So we were confronted with this all the time, like all the time.
I have
was
a friend
definite-
who slept over one night, and she called her boyfriend in the morning, and she was like, "Oh my God, Grandpa slept under the sink in the bathroom," and he like it was like, "What? What do you mean?" Because he obviously didn't know that it was a cat. So
That's hysterical. So that last but not least, so Thaddeus, tell us, do you have a cat story for us that you can share?
Actually, that poem did not take me to a cat story. That's not what it kicked off for me. It kicked off two different things. I mean, even though, you know, as you and I both know, that we had a cat for 22 years, 3 months, and 14 days, who made a huge impression on our lives. Actually, the Bukowski poem took me two places. One was that I can never hear Bukowski brought up without thinking about all those young male writers who I've been around my whole life who are like, man, if I just drank more, I could write like Bukowski, or man, if I just, womanized more and fought more and drank more, I could be Hemingway, and then that was the thing that kept me from reading Bukowski for a very long time. The thing that kept me from reading Bukowski was a lot of his fans. And then I read one of the most heartbreaking poems I've ever read, and lo and behold, it was Charles Bukowski. And that's how, I then went and read Post Office, and then started reading his collections of poetry, starting with Play the Piano Drunk Until the Fingers Start to Bleed a Little, I think was his first collection that I read. And then, and then I became a huge Bukowski fan. But the place where this took me was to thinking about heroes and how those people, and of course, I mean, in this case, a cat who becomes someone's hero, the heroes don't usually sign up for the job, I mean, the cat certainly didn't sign up for getting run over and becoming this icon to Charles Bukowski. And so it started me thinking about people like that in my life, one of whom is your mom, I mean, my mother-in-law. And it seems like the way that they became heroes was through no action of their own. I mean, in the case of your mom, I mean, she certainly didn't. But she became my hero in a lot of ways by surviving. And I remember a conversation that I had with her a long time ago. So those of you who don't know the backstory, and I mean, most of you don't, my mother-in-law grew up in the Philippines and survived the Japanese occupation of the Philippines in World War II. And during that time, she saw lots of atrocities that I won't, recount here, that she told me about. And that included her being shot, and she, by a Japanese soldier. And she recounted this story to me just like very matter-of-factly. And she got shot through her upper left shoulder. And she was the one that explained to me what a non-frangible bullet is. So the bullet just passed through and didn't explode, and therefore she was alive. And I asked her, at that moment when you were running away from the Japanese soldier and he was yelling, "Running, okay to kill," what went through your mind? And she said, well, I could hear the bullets going past my head. And the first thing I thought of was, can't you shoot straight, young man? And that really surprised me. I mean, here she was, she's, like I said, my personal hero for surviving and all these things. And at that moment, she was, hoping that he would just take her out of her misery. And that's how she put it. She said, I hope that he would take me out of my misery. I I was a poor girl living in the Philippines, and I had no father, and I had been in a war, and I just wanted it to be over. And that was absolutely stunning to me. And so, you know, here she is, you know, this woman who I knew obviously years and years later, who had none of these things that she had been through ever kept her from being loving and cheerful and just the brightest, kindest person I have ever known in my life. And, you know, all that she was trying to do was live. That was it. All she was trying to do was live. And she became a hero to me and, you know, several other people. So yeah, I mean, that's where this whole poem took me to, you know, the fact that heroes don't sign up for the job. They really don't.
Like all you're trying to do, Thaddeus, is make us cry. For crying out loud.
Yeah.
I guess this is my way of saying thank you for that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. I didn't realize that, you know, my mom was going to be one of the tough motherfuckers that we're talking about today. But yeah,
Oh
she
my,
was. She was
oh
a
my
survivor.
God. She raised 5 kids in a house with no floor. My God, you know. I mean,
Well,
that's pretty tough.
they moved out of that house by the time I was born, so. Or,
Okay, 4
Anyways.
kids. 4 kids. All right.
Speaking of 4, it's now time for our biscuit rating. It's from 5 to 0 biscuits being the best rating, 0 being the best rating. It means that no biscuits were needed to enjoy this poem. So, Thaddeus, what is your biscuit rating for one tough motherfucker?
Oh, 0 biscuits. None. Yeah. It just rang like a bell for me. Yeah.
And Katie, what do you think?
I think I would give it 1 biscuit, just because when I give no biscuits is because I'm shaking with every single word, you know, no expectation, no pressure, but like every word makes me shake. And the story I loved so much, but the writing as a poem, I didn't stop at a particular line thinking, wow, I just love the story so much more than I love the writing. So I would need that 1 biscuit to get through the writing, to get to the story.
Yeah, I hear you. Flaminia, what do you think? How many biscuits?
0 biscuits for me, also because I changed my mind about Bukowski, I think. You made me change my mind. I actually agree with what Thaddeus was saying, that I don't particularly like people who like Bukowski, but I might be wrong too now, because this poem is beautiful, and I mean, cats are certainly these complex animals, and they're, you know, really what Thaddeus were saying, heroes. But yeah, so 0 biscuits for me.
Cool. And Sophie, what do you think?
Well, what you just said, Flaminia, reminded me of this poem by Ocean Vuong, where he's saying at some point, note to self, anybody who says that their favorite writer is Jack Kerouac is probably, what is it that he says? Is probably
A douchebag.
a douchebag. Awesome. All right. I am with Katie, and I want to add 1 biscuit to that. So unfortunately, I have 2 biscuits. 1 is because there was almost nothing in the language that made me go like, yes, you know, like sometimes, like just the way that words come together, I get so excited, so nerdily excited about this. And the nerd in me was like a little bit disappointed. But I always have this with Bukowski, to be honest. He's not one of my favorite writers. So 1 biscuit for that. And then the other biscuit was just kind of, you know, because towards the end there's this whole like the interviewers don't get it, and there's this whole like misunderstood artist thing that I'm like a little bit tired of, especially like maybe from the beat poets, and it's kind of like, okay, all right, you know. So I'm gonna add like a little biscuit for that, because it did get to me when I was writing it. It took me out of the beautiful story, which I did find beautiful, like, you know, the content of it kind of got to me, but like language didn't really pop, and you know, there was a misunderstood artist cliche thing a little bit for me.
All right. And Alina, tell me how many biscuits?
Wow. Okay. I don't know. I'm struggling with this one. I don't know if it's a zero biscuit or one biscuit poem for me
Oh,
because
it's okay.
I don't know. I guess can I give it half a biscuit because he was kicking me in the hard balls the entire time, and like I said, I think you can build a religion around this, like around this poem, in that there's deep caring in it, and also a sense of like nothing is as big as it seems, you know. And I mean, I don't know. I think it's a very deep work actually, and it did make me change my mind about Bukowski. But I definitely also see what you guys are saying about he didn't necessarily do that much with language, but I feel like the misunderstood artist thing doesn't bother me because I think it has to do with perspective on just perspective and what we see and what we don't see. And so I'm okay with that. But so I'll give it half a biscuit. But in general, I was kicked in the hard balls the whole time, and I love this poem. And it did make me change my mind about Bukowski. So I'm with Thaddeus there.
Right on. Yeah, and for me, actually, at first I thought I was going to give it zero biscuits because I'm with all of you. I didn't think Charles Bukowski was going to be any poet that I liked, but I'm going to get a half because you're right. There isn't any beautiful language. I mean, he just describes how drunkenly, the drunken smoky light, and that brought it. It actually put me in the atmosphere. Hearing that, so I'll give it a half a biscuit. And Charles Bukowski, like his cat, is one tough motherfucker. He is a testament to hyper masculine writers who write about what they know best. That life is tough for tough guys like him, right? But I also love that he writes about what he loves too, especially when he writes about his love for tough motherfucking cats. So anyways, that's it for this edition of Magnificent Shit, where we search the world over for lit that kicks you in the heart balls. And we'll be kicking you in the heart balls as hard as we can on the next podcast. So until then, thanks for tuning in.
Heart. Oh.
So sorry.
Heart,
Connection.
balls, heart, balls, heart.
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 Heart,
Balls.
Balls.
Heart,
ball,
Heart. Balls.
heart,
balls,
heart,
heart,
ball.
balls.